Good. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Newport Shipping's Containerized LNG Retrofit concept press briefing. I'm going to lead you through this hour, but hopefully take as much of a backseat role as I possibly can and let everybody else ask as many questions as they want to. I'll introduce the speakers in a minute, but just a reminder of the way that we do things with these online press briefings. We'll have the presentations that are going to be from Turnkey, Ingmar, and Shia in a minute. Prior to that, I'll just show you a quick video that they put together. But when it comes to the questions, I'll start asking questions. As always, I want everybody else to interrupt me and start asking their questions to get the dialogue going. You can either do it two ways. You can wave your hand at me if you've got your video camera on, or you can just unmute yourself and just start interrupting me and telling everybody you want to ask a question. That'd probably be the best way. Just bear in mind other people might be speaking. There is a question and a chat function in this event, so you can put them there if you don't have the capability to open your microphone, or if you just want to send a question, and then I'll ask them on your behalf if you want to. Session is being recorded, and I think following the event, if you want to have one-on-one discussions with Newport Shipping, then talk to Christina afterwards. So that's it from me. So I'm going to just very quickly play this short video that Newport Shipping have asked me to do, and then I'll just do a quick introduction of the speakers, then hand over to them. So just bear with me a second. Good, so that gives a basic overview of what we're going to be talking about over the next hour. So we're going to hand over now to Newport Shipping. First of all, Sergey Korlak from the Research and Development Department, Head of Research and Development, is going to talk about the actual technology. Then we'll hear from Ingmar and from Shia about the commercial and financial aspects or the of this project and how they see it all fitting together in the sort of bigger picture thing. So Turnkey, if I can hand over to you, please, and now for your part of the presentation.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Craig. And I'm Turgay Kolak, Head of R&D Department at Newport Shipping, and I will briefly explain our conceptual design for the container vessels, which is approved by BV, approved in principle by BV with cooperation of Marine Services in Germany. As all we are aware, targeted CO2 emissions requires alternative fuels, and LNG can immediately reduce it up to 25%. For further reduction on emissions, more can be achieved by blending bio-LNG or synthetic LNG. In our concept is based on to use LNG containers in modular cell guide structure as a portable fuel tanks for ships. Also, the modular protective structure is generic, which means it can be easily adapted to different size of ships and different ships as well, and can be produced without need of the vessel at shipyard. This is the most important point. So the ship is no more needed to wait at the yard for the whole retrofit process, and off-hire period will be significantly reduced. Again, by using containers, LNG can be practically transferred from onshore terminals to the ports. We believe, not all of the vessels, of course, we believe most of the vessels will satisfy the carbon dioxide emission requirements with conventional LNG till 2030. But later on, the further emissions can be available with bio-LNG or synthetic LNG, which can be filled in the same container that we have. Since the other containers are standard and portable, they can be transferred also easily by trucks to different filling stations, whereas far away from the ports. And mobility is the key feature of these containers to reach small-scale bio-LNG facilities by truck or by rail. So all are based on the mobility of these containers and the reducing the retrofit time at shipyard. Okay, can we pass the next slide, please? Yeah. In our concept, the standard 40-foot container is used with a 40 cubic meter gross tank capacity, and we call it as an energy tank. In the energy tank at 82% filling, totally 15 tons LNG can be held up to 80 days on ship and up to 90 days on site. It's fully compliant with rules and regulations for land and sea transport, including the rail transport as well. On the other side, we developed a standard protective structure on board, which can be practically configured to different sizes of ships, as I mentioned before. And it's optimized for 7 stacks in vertical direction with minimum material. And again, the structure is also compliant with the regulations for sea transport and all checks and controls done by, for the generic one, I mean, done by Provertas. On next slide, we can see the potential of our solutions, actually potential LNG convertible vessels. About potential vessels, we used IHS database, which is generally available for, if you pay, of course, to find suitable vessels. And based on this statistical data of existing vessels, which are below 10 years old, we found out about 900 ships have potential for LNG retrofitting. If we consider also the gas-ready new buildings and new building orders, this number is to reach up to 1,100. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we believe that most of those vessels will satisfy the CO2 emissions till 2030 by just conventional LNG. And thank you. That's all from my side. And now I will hand over to Sia.
Thank you, Turgay, and thank you all for coming. So Turgay just give the highlight about our concept, and I will say a few words about why we do it and how we do it. And so our core business is ship repair and the retrofit. We deliver turnkey contract with our global sales team and project team locally, and also shipyard network and with deferred payment So our philosophy is to give the maximum flexibility to owners when it comes to timing, location, and costing for ship repair and the retrofit. So if we look at the new building market, there has been a strong activity in ordering of LNG fueled vessels. Today there are about 400 vessels on order, which is driven by LNG. So we take it a vote of confidence by the market, and we expect to continue this trend. But in today's market, to order the next new building, it's going to cost more and takes longer to deliver. So that makes it increasingly competitive for retrofitting the current fleet, especially if you want to achieve the goal for decarbonization within the target time frame. It's also necessary because we need the right scale. 400 vessels is not even 0.5% of the current fleet. So today our concept is targeting the container vessels, and this concept, compared to the normal way of retrofitting, it takes much less time, and also it costs much less. So this is really, we believe, a very competitive concept for the container vessels. So how are we gonna do it? And Greg, next slide, please. So we try to be the bridge to close the gap between all parties, ship owners, charterers, and the market. We close the commercial gap, but also the technical gap. So we will deliver a turnkey contract to our clients with a single contract with ship owner. We will be the single point of contact. So the scope of our contract will include design engineering, and we will use our internal design capability together with our design partners. And the delivery of the equipment will be from reputable makers who are also our partners. And our project team will execute the project at one of our partner yards, but it can also be other yards who has the right capability and facility. But the project overall is handled by a Newport team. So this will tremendously reduce the time and the cost as far as the client is concerned. They don't need to deal with multiple parties, but it comes without a compromise on the quality, of course. So another important element is on the costing with the deferred payment we are offering. And before I move on, pass on to Ingmar, I just want to make a final note is that our role is to be the technical enabler to get the vessel ready technically. But as you can see with this concept, it takes more than us to make it work. We're talking about a whole logistic chain here because you have the cargo supply, the filling and refueling of the tanks, the delivery of the container tanks to the port, and also loading and unloading and the port operation. So it really takes a whole industrial approach to make it work. So we are doing our part, but we really hope that every players will take one step further so that the whole thing can work smoothly. So with that note, I will pass on to Ingmar.
Yes, hi, it's Ingmar here from the Hamburg office. First of all, a warm welcome to everybody. As Xia just said correctly, our role is very much closing the gap. Therefore, I will, in the upcoming minutes, I will cover the finance part when it comes to retrofit or green projects and what we as Newport can offer to our clients. In most retrofit projects, the finance element can be seen as a critical part to make a project come to life. Unfortunately, we have even seen projects where, because of missing finance, they did not happen at all. But let me start with a positive outlook. Finance for green projects is available and cannot be seen as a bottleneck any longer. We expect a rise in demand for retrofit finance. We can already see the demand is growing, and this is moving towards a global green ship finance market. That's why we think the owners should take really advantage of the possibilities available from the financing community for green investments and to avoid the negative effects of not doing anything. Craig, could you please next page? Yes. Our turnkey decarbonization solution ensures that the LNG retrofit investment is aligned with the strategic and commercial goals of our clients. The benefits of the retrofit include, for example, an evaluation of the retrofit option for each vessel in the fleet of the owner, access to a turnkey execution from our partner yards and suppliers, and finally, access to finance to support the retrofit project or investment. Next page, please. We are working with leading financing sources worldwide, and what we will try is to obtain conditional funding approval for the retrofit program, and this will highlight how it contributes to the earnings, the value, and the trading life of the retrofitted vessel, and how the ship's environmental score will improve as a result. Therefore, our turnkey retrofit solution lowers the cost of capital as less costly equity is needed. Next page, please. Container shipping owners will have to invest in their fleets through new builds and retrofits in order to comply with emission regulation and to retain their license to operate. Moreover, they are facing more and more pressure from their clients and consumers to provide clean transport. We think our solution is an answer to this. Thank you very much. Next page, please.
Good. Thank you very much, Ingmar and Turnkey and Shea. Just a quick reminder to everybody that you can use your hands to wave, your microphones to talk, or put your questions or comments in the chat or questions function. The idea here is that you don't let me just hog the next half an hour. You fill in the gaps and ask your questions as well. So if as many of you could put on your cameras as possible, so I can see you, we can see you, it'd be really appreciated. We try and make these events collegial so that we can all take part, but then you can ask your private questions to them later in a one-to-one message. I'm gonna start though just looking at the technology here a little bit, Turnkey, and how you see this working. And my first thought when I saw the design was, having worked on container ships myself and having seen recently in particular a lot of photographs of stacks cascading as containers have been lost at sea. When you're putting something at the back of the ship, it's going to be subjected to a lot of forces. Can you comment a little bit about, can you tell me a little bit more about how you've taken into account, particularly on deep sea rough weather voyages, how you can minimize those risks of containers being lost?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Craig. As I mentioned, maybe the second page of the slide, I think the structure is compliant with sea transportation, and we have analyzed the structure, finite element analysis. Of course, for the heavy seas, the structure is sufficient enough as per class requirements, and also, as you know, with the photographs you have seen, there are no cell guides around that containers. There's no protective structure, but in our concept, we have a protective structure around the containers. So even we have a small beams between the stacks, between the rows. So to lose those containers, the ship must capsize. I mean. But it will also prevent it if you use Swiss locks, quick coupling, to connect the containers to each other. Also, we have lashing arrangements on those structure as well, so you can have some structural connections to the containers.
So the containers will be kind of rows of 7 or so, and yeah. Each row is connected together, all the containers in one row. The design is such that all the containers in one row would be connected together, would they?
I mean, our you can't see the detailed drawings on this presentation, but each container can be secured to the structure individually.
Okay. But how
It's
long?
not required. It's
Yeah.
not required by classification, but just for safety measurements, we include that structure as well.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
it's standard.
Alan, go ahead.
Yeah. Just a couple of questions. Are your that container configuration at the back of the ship, is it just above the deck, or is it below the deck as well? Where with the containers you would have above the deck and below the deck. The second thing is, how many have you taken into consideration? How many containers or the capacity of containers that the ship will lose because you're putting your LNG stack on board?
Okay, thank you. For the first question, all the containers are above the deck. If you check the presentation, I think it's attached to the link. All the containers and structures above the mooring deck, aft mooring deck. Also between mooring deck and the containers, there are some kind of cofferdams and fuel gas handling locations, rooms. So it's all are above the deck. I think that's the first question. And the second question.
Turnkey, just to clarify on that. So I guess from what Alan was saying is there's no lost container space under the deck. If all of the LNG containers are above deck, there's no lost container space, cargo space under the deck.
No. Okay. It's maybe I misunderstood. That's the question. Yeah. So this second question is about just in case an accident, how many containers are we lost, or how many cargo capacity did we lose?
I think it was cargo capacity.
Cargo capacity. In our dummy study, first of all, as you know, most of the containers are not fully loaded always. So we prevent to not interfere with the cargo area. Because of that reason, we put all the containers as possible as to up. And how many containers do we lose? I think maybe for our dummy study, it's about 105 LNG containers. So it means about 25 containers we lost, as if you think about the container. But if you think about the cargo container, we lost about 140 containers for our dummy vessel.
What sort of size vessel would you be thinking about?
It was a 9,500 TEU container vessel.
Yeah. When you looked at that, when you showed that table of the potential market that you see for the, I think it was nearly 900 vessels. Is this 900 vessels that are around the age that you think would be suitable for retrofitting? In other words, around the 10-year-old mark? Yes,
exactly. The most important part is the engine type, main engine type, because as all we know, MC engines cannot be retrofitted to LNG. So we have three bases for our study. First one is it should be below 10 years old. Second one is it should be able to convert the main engine. And the last one, size. We need to have a free space at aft mooring deck.
Okay.
Can I ask you another question? With the retrofit operation, with most of the LNG ships or LNG ready ships that are being built, the majority of them would have an LNG tank on board. So this kind of retrofit wouldn't really apply to the ships which were LNG ready, just being built or just being built. If then they're just for ships which have got an ordinary engine, which is designed for ordinary diesel, how long would the retrofit take for the ship to go onto your system and be LNG ready? And can it be done within a normal dry docking schedule?
Yeah, I think it's again for me. Yeah, it's starting from your last question. It could be done during the scheduled dry docking, but it will take maybe a little bit more, 45 days or 60 days. We need to see the project, because it strongly depends on the size of the vessel. And as we mentioned, the structural part can be produced without the vessel. So it's generic, and it could be just a design and pre-manufacturing at the shipyard or somewhere outside. And then we will just mount that part to the modular part to the ship's uptake. So about the gas-ready, I have seen many gas-ready ships, but they don't include the tanks. They have just space for them. So again, they need to have installed those tanks.
So what percentage do you put on the ships that are being built at the moment, which are LNG ready, don't have the tank on board, just the space?
I have no idea about that one, but I believe it will be at least 50%, because some of them already in negotiations with the engine makers or tank makers, and they have changed their orders. They can change their orders to from gas ready to gas already. So I can't give a specific number because I can't see the contracts or the change orders.
Got a question coming in relating to the cost, Ingmar, and Turnkey was mentioning about less time and less money, but as given the projects are all different, can you give some sort of guidance on the costs that you would expect to be talking about with owners?
Yeah, listen, on the costs, I would, yeah, see how to,
yeah, maybe I should. I mean, okay, a simple answer, it is cheaper. But I mean, we don't give the number here because it's really, first of all, it depends on the vessel situation as well. And I also want to mention that apart from the retrofit cost, there's operational cost, because the containers, the tanks, the owner doesn't have to own them. They can lease, they can have lease agreement, and they only pay for the cargo. So some other company can arrange a logistic supply for the containers, filling, refueling, loading, and offloading. So this reduces the operational cost of the owners as well. So we have to look at the both costs. So overall, we believe it's much more cost-efficient solution, relatively speaking, to other available solutions.
But Shia, you mentioned the whole logistics chain that would have to be developed for this solution to be a success. So how are you part of those discussions in terms of developing you mentioned that your focus is on getting the vessel ready to be part of that solution, but if this solution is your idea, how are you being part of encouraging the other actors that need to be part of this logistics chain?
Yeah, I mean, our main role, as I mentioned, we are the enabler on technical side and also a bit commercial with the financing. So we are not really trying to build up a logistic chain because it's not our core business. But if you look at the world now, the LNG supply infrastructure is growing and it will continue to grow anyway. So it's just a matter of how you supply the LNG in different ways. So when owner recognize this concept, so it will be driven by their customers, and eventually the suppliers will line up to supply whatever the market needed. The port will the container ports already have the facility to loading, offloading. It's just that they need to have special treatment, special area to put all the container tanks. And you do have the trucks, the logistic companies delivering the tanks, containers. So it's, I would say, the backbone of the supply chain is there. It's just how much focus people want to shift to this type of supply rather than normal LNG bunkering. But in the end, it will be driven by the end user, mostly the ship owners, and also the charterers as well. So that's going back to my last point, is we need a coordinated approach, and we are doing our best to promote this concept, and we hope we will get more traction.
Have you had discussions with other supply chain elements already to sort of suss out and gauge the appetite that they might have today for this?
We did have a discussion with ports, for example, and there are some ports seriously considering this kind of concept. They are actually already having in their plan already. So we had certain discussion with them, and yeah, also with ship owners and some other suppliers for the tank, the container itself. So we are having multiple discussions with different players.
And in terms of the number of containers that you would need, because obviously you can't just use only the containers on the ship, you need to have a surplus supply. So ships need to, a bit like the container industry today, there's always empties that have to be sent back and refilled. So have you looked at that element of the supply chain, the actual container itself, the supply of the containers, how many you might need to realize your goal? If you've got a certain percentage of these 900 plus 222 vessels that you listed, have you got an estimate on how many containers, how many pressurized containers that you would need to fulfill that commitment?
So I may take a first jab, and Turnkey, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. So yes, you're right. So you're basically talking about redundancy or shadow containers. For every containers at sea on board, you need to have a certain number of containers ready at port. So most likely this will start from, first of all, the major ports with the enough facility and capacity, like the major container ports. So I think we were talking about there's a ratio. It's a 2:1 or 3:1 ratio as a shadow container. So for every container on board the vessel, you need 2 to 3 ready at the port anytime. So Turnkey, please add if I'm missing something.
Yeah, it's correct, but I cannot. If you have more than one container vessels in your, think about as a pool. If you have 100 vessels, those shadow containers will be reduced significantly because you will only need to fill the empty ones, and always not this. All vessels will be the same place. Also, we are now studying on a simulation how many containers. We will pick some vessels from the database, and we are trying to find out how many shadow containers and how this logistics will be improved.
Right. Can I have a couple of questions?
Have
you got a minimum ship size and a maximum ship size that you can put this system on? That's the first question. The second question is, are we going to see in the future this same system put upon other ships, such as cruise vessels, tankers, bulk carriers, etc.?
Yeah, for first question, we checked also on the table. You can see if of that table, there is ship size row on top.
I can show that again.
Yeah, it's between 3,050. It should be, yeah, between 4,000. You see that it's grouped in different row lines. So lines rows, you can see it will be between 4,000 and 16,000 to be considered, because below we can say 3,500 TEU is possible, but not all of them, because we need to have a free space at aft. And for your next question, yes, it's possible to use on other vessels, but it's not so efficient, because you need, for example, for bulk carriers, you need to have too many deck operations, and you don't have enough space at aft generally. For crew vessels and cruise vessels, for short voyage, it could be possible, but I think they will not prefer that solution, because we have discussed with Valeria from Spain, and they want to have their own tank, let's say. It's slightly different. You know, on other vessels, you carry only cargo, but on container, you don't own the cargo container itself.
You mentioned future fuels, bio-LNG, e-LNG. Last year there was a trial, with MAN on a container ship on an LNG container ship to drop in biofuels into an LNG vessel, LNG powered container vessel. With your option here, would it be possible to have some of the containers LNG and some of them using bio-LNG or e-LNG, and then to blend in? My question is sort of erring towards this transition that we're talking about, and whether we'll see a mixture of different sources of LNG in a single vessel, and how that would be blended to be fed into the engine.
Yeah, may I start first, and then Shia will continue. Think about, you have two tracks, and one is using the bio LNG or carbon neutral LNG, and the other track is using conventional. So you have a 50% blended. You don't need to put 50% for each vessel. So if you have a fleet, and if it's suitable for that port, you can use that container fully bio or synthetic LNG, or it could be blended, of course. And we have already discussed this with some, if I'm not wrong, from Norwegian company. Yeah, do you remember that one about blending? So we are working on it as well.
Good. Does anybody else have any other questions? I don't want to be the only one. Declan, go ahead.
Hi there, Declan from Lloyd's List. Who pays for all of these LNG tanks, which presumably have to be available everywhere these ships plan on calling? And second question, would you see this, is this a better option for, say, smaller or tramp ships who can't find LNG bunkered normally?
Yeah, I'll take the first question. I mean, as mentioned earlier, it's the supply delivery of the LNG tanks can be a business case in itself. So the ship owners can have a lease agreement just to have the tanks on board, but they only pay for the cargo. They don't want to purchase or own all the tanks. So in our plan is that another logistics company, maybe the supplier of the LNG, or another company or even the port, who can own the tanks and fill it with LNG and distribute to the vessel in a kind of lease agreement. It's like a battery pack. So you don't own the battery, but you pay the electricity, and the battery can be leased, the pack. So can you repeat the second question? Sorry.
You know that say tramp ships or smaller operators don't tend to go for LNG ships because LNG is not bunkered at some of the places that they tend to go. So would you maybe market this as a better option for those sorts of ships? or are you thinking, you know, the Ever Given size, you know, mega container ships? Does it work just as well for each, or who's your target market?
Going to start with, most likely it will happen in the major ports with major line and big sizes to reach economic scale. So there's going to be a process where it filters down to more ports and more segmented market. So there is a process there, and how far and how fast it will go, it's not something that we can easily predict today here. So yeah, I don't have the perfect answer, but I would imagine it's a process.
Ines, I think you had a question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ines. I'm the editor of Ports and Harbours magazine. You've already mentioned that you've worked with a few ports, so maybe can you elaborate a little bit on what kind of cooperation you're looking for, and also how does the loading and unloading fit into the port operation? So would that be done with normal container unloading, or do you have to go and call another berth for this?
Yeah, I mean, we are having discussion with the ports, and we also sign NDA with the ports. So it's not really for us to disclose information. It's actually the port. They have to disclose if they want to. So there's not really much details so we can disclose here. But general impression that there are ports, they're seriously considering even planning for this kind of activity, because it fits naturally to their normal handling of containers. You just need to have special area and treatment, how you handle the LNG containers. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess you would use the ordinary, in a terminal, in a container terminal, use the ordinary systems that they would have.
Yes.
Okay.
In our approval in principle, it's mentioned that we have about 100-page documentation on that one, and it's not only possible for standard port terminals, it's also possible to load and unload during the cargo operation as well.
Would that include even attaching the fuel hoses?
Yes, exactly, with proper precautions, of course. Exactly.
Yeah. So that would imply that as you're using the fuel, you'd be using the fuel from the top containers downwards, so that when you came to discharge the empties, you would start from the top and the bottom ones would still be used while the vessel was still in port. Would that be right?
Yes, it will be isolated by layer.
Yeah. Okay, good. Are there any other questions from anybody, or shall I just continue? I'm happy to, as usual. Declan, again? Yep, go ahead.
So what's the main thing that you need and the biggest barrier to getting this off the ground?
Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, start with the customer. So the customer has to, I mean, the facility, if cost is not an issue, I mean, the facility is there, supply is there. I mean, we will make it, the market will make it work, but you need to start with the customer and then the charterers as well. So in the end, the charter will pay for, I mean, the charter rates. But above that, I mean, economic aside, the decarbonization target has to be met, and the market needs a solution, and the solution is with the current fleet. So it's a question of how we do it. And there are two important conditions we need to bear in mind. First is the time frame. What time we're talking about? Because the vessel has a lifespan. Within their lifespan, something needs to be done. And the second is the scale. What scale do we want to achieve? So when we look at all this, and then I think in the end, the client, the market will make up their mind, and hopefully faster. So when that happens, then it will help definitely with the whole concept and the realization of the concept.
Can I turn a little bit to the actual process you envisage when it comes to retrofits, something like this? Where do you envisage this happening? Because retrofit, or retrofitting is often done in repair yards, isn't it? But is the installation and the conversion of an engine, which would have to happen as well, and the installation of the LNG fuel systems, do you not see this happening more at other sort of new building yards rather than at retrofit yards? And how does that fit into your relationship with your clients or your partners who are the shipyards, repair yards?
Yeah, I mean, it might happen anywhere, anytime. So that's why we have our network of shipyard, and that's the reason to have it, to have the flexibility. New building yards, I'm not sure because they are very busy. Right now, if you look at the slots, people are really fighting for the slots for new buildings. So the repair yards, most likely, they will have the capacity because also you are doing the dry docking at the same time. So that will make sense to do it with the repair yards, of course, yards with the right facility. And for us, I mean, we are not really making a call for the location or area. So we are open and we are flexible because in the end, we will be, our project team will be handling the project. We're using the yard as a facility. We're not leading the whole project to the yard. It's not like the new building project where the shipyard is the main contractual party to the ship owner. In our case, we are the contractual party to the ship owner, and we have the flexibility to choose the location and time, and partners, of course.
And do you think it would take quite a long time, given the length, given the number of partners that need to be engaged with the creation of the whole logistics chain that you mentioned? Do you think it would take a long time before you get your first customer and we see this solution being installed onto a ship and sailing?
Hopefully not, but there's always, I mean, there's a sales cycle is always there. We cannot avoid this question. But as far as we see it, all things being equal, it's faster than you build a new vessel, and it's also cheaper and less complicated. And the vessel can continue trading during the planning design stage and while the equipments are being produced. So only when everything is done and the timing is scheduled, the vessel go to the yard and take the yard time. So before that, its vessel is trading as normal. So we try to minimize the yard time.
Yeah. And I guess here we're looking at vessels that are going to have the engines will be converted to dual fuel. So if you find that there aren't enough containers, you would still be able to switch to more traditional hydrocarbon fuels, bunker fuels.
Right.
Yeah.
Has anybody got any other questions or comments, thoughts, questions? I can't see anybody, and I can't see any questions coming in on the chat or on the question forum as well. So go ahead, Declan. Go on.
If I could. Yeah. How long before, especially container ship owners, want to take their ships off the water, given how much money they're making, the cost of dry docking a ship or for this sort of retrofit, and then if they're gonna commit to making an expense like that, why not go for a normal dual fuel retrofit? I'm just thinking there's a lot of moving parts to this, and I'm trying to think about how much it'll cost and how long it'll take, but it's a lot to get my head around.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, it's actually for discussion. It's not for us to decide. I mean, but there is a deadline. I mean, when the 2023 deadline for the the decarbonization target. So something has to be done. But on the other side, the bright side, today there is enough money for the container lines to do this kind of job. If 5 years ago, if you asked them to, then who's going to pay for it? At least now. So the financing is a smaller issue. But in the end, it's the market who will push for when. And we have the regulation, the IMO timeline.
There's a lot of pressure being put on the whole industry relating to future fuels, and LNG, bio LNG or synthetic LNG is merely one part of that, and it's already a controversial fuel when you see how methanol and ammonia is being promoted in different corners of the industry as well. And I know there are some talks already, and there are some projects looking at retrofitting of methanol and ammonia engines. So my question is, does this design, is it beholden only to LNG, or have you considered how it could be used if the industry starts to look at retrofitting for other fuel types?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. When you were talking about the previous question, actually, you were limiting the cargo type energy type into LNG, bio, and synthetic. I mean, in the end, we're not trying to. I think in the end, different fuel options will be developed in parallel. That's how it goes. And it's not, in the end, it's not about the fuel. It's about the vessel. The fuel is the mean, the vessel is the end. So whatever works is what's important. And actually, just to maybe to try to be a bit brave on the idea, now we have the tanks and the containers, which is for LNG, by either normal LNG and bio LNG. But it might be an energy tank, which can hold different energies, I mean fuels. It's just a matter of putting it in the tank and plug it to the vessel and to fuel the vessel. So there is a possibility to get more versatile in what is contained in the tank. But that's maybe it's more in the future. It's not for today's discussion. It's just a bit of thought.
Yeah. Good. Excellent. Well, we're coming up to the end of the hour. So if anybody wants the slides that Newport Shipping showed, they are there as a handout. If you look on the control panel that you may have, you'll see as handouts, and you'll see it possibly says 1 of 5. So you can download the presentation that they use then, or get in touch with Christina, and she'll be able to send it to you as well. So if there aren't any other questions, if nobody else has got any other comments and that, and I don't see any waves of hands or interruptions, I'll say thank you to everybody. And Christina, can I hand back to you?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you also to everyone for showing up today. And as Craig said, if you want any background material or you want interviews or anything, please get in touch and I can line it up and send you over anything you need. Okay, and another thing, I do have a press release, which I can send you also after this. It is under embargo until tomorrow morning, 9 AM CET, but I can send that over to you now if you, but keep in mind it's under embargo then. Yeah?
Lovely. Good. Thank you, everybody, and see you in sunny Oslo next month.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
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 Bye.